Good morning, welcome back. Today I'm going to continue our chats about botany. And yesterday we were talking about plant classification. And that's only one way that we can classify all the different plants that we have. They have, of all of the different species that we've even discovered, there's over 500,000. That's over 500,000 different types of plants. So it's not easy to classify the plants and say what goes exactly where in which group. You could just as easily say all the brown plants in this group, all the green plants in this group, all the yellow plants in this group, as you could say what we were looking at yesterday. That the first thing that we want to do is break it down from the plants that have seeds to the plants that don't have seeds. Now, those plants have spores. Those are the plants that we're going to get into first. But before we do that, I want to chat a little bit more about taxonomy when it comes to botany, because when we're talking about taxonomy, now we're getting more specific. And the reason that this is essential is because, as I said about classification, you can classify these plants in many different ways. You could say, okay, these are trees and these are flowers, and maybe these are mosses and these are the algae. And so you could put them in different groups like that. You could also say these are the vascular ones, these are the non-vascular ones. We'll get into that later. Don't worry about it for now. With plant taxonomy, we're being much more specific, and we're giving it both a common name so that people know exactly what it is, and we're also going to give it a Latin name so that you see what family that it's in, and you're going to see exactly where it lies, and that so there's no misinformation if we go between languages. So in Asia and China and Japan and India, in the Americas and South America to North America, when we start going between the languages, we're still going to be able to know which plants we're studying, so that botanists from different cultures can be looking at the same plant and just know that it's the same thing. This is especially important because of all of the uses of plants. One of the biggest uses that humans have for plants is food. We eat a lot of plants, and when we're not eating plants, we're eating stuff that eats plants. So if we're not eating low food chain plants, then we're eating animals that ate plants. And so we do need to eat plants to survive. So for our own survival, plants are a really essential thing. And so we do need to figure out what these things are. And we also need to respect the plants. We need to respect the ecosystem and not destroy too much of their environment while we're making our own homes, because plants are currently and rapidly going extinct. What that means is that there are no more left of that particular species of plant. They're all completely dead. Now, some of this is a normal occurrence. Some of this actually just happens normally throughout history. And we don't know how often it's happened throughout history because we haven't always been studying plants. For most of our lives, we were just focusing on which plants to eat and not die, and which plants we can eat and actually provide really good energy and vitamins and minerals, our carbohydrates and our fats and our fibers and our proteins that we need to survive, to continue on, and to have the energy to move as humans. So where do we go from here? I want to go over a chart, and I will give you a printout today. And now we're going to start to look at getting much more specific as far as what are these plants, where do they fall exactly when we're looking at the taxonomy, we're looking at the scientific breakdown of where these plants belong. And I think something that's essential to talk about, and before we go on, is do these plants deserve to live? And of course, I think so. But this is an interesting philosophical argument. We as people have use for certain plants, and so especially these food-bearing plants, especially trees that are going to create wood, products that we create from the trees like paper goods. We make toilet paper. We're seeing this as a big issue right now, that we're running out of toilet paper at the stores. we build our houses out of wood pretty significantly still. We build our garden beds to create more plants out of wood. You can see I'm actually in my own garden bed right now, and it's got these big wooden beams that are supporting these structures where I could plant our garden. So when we talk about plants, when we talk about weeds, a weed really is just it's just a regular plant that we haven't learned what to do with yet as humans. A lot of weeds are edible. A lot of things that are considered weeds that grow in the wild have traditionally been food groups for indigenous peoples, and we can still eat them, and we can still do really cool things with them. And even if we can't, do these plants deserve to live? And so it's a question that I didn't pose when we were studying animals, when we were doing our zoology block. Certain things are disappearing from the earth, and how can we coexist with these plants? Obviously, with gardening, we're planting the plants that we want to have, but I also have plenty of plants in here that I didn't plant the seeds. They just kind of grew here on their own. Some of them I removed because they get way too big, and some of them I just kind of let them grow because they're just doing their thing. They're not really bothering the other plants, and they're just coexisting nicely. And what I noticed in my own observation, which I tasked you all to do an observation yesterday, what I noticed was the things that I didn't know that ate these plants. So there's all kinds of bugs and little animals, and the squirrels and the birds get in here, and they're eating stuff that I didn't even know that they ate. They're just chewing on roots and seeds, stems, and some of the leaves even. And so what I intended to do with the garden was to provide food and beauty for my family. We grow flowers, we grow fruits and vegetables, and all kinds of things. And then even with some of the weeds that I had no intention of planting, we're providing food for things outside of my family. The animals around here eat those things. So that's really quite wonderful. That's an unexpected benefit of having this garden. So that's one healthy way that we can coexist. But ultimately, the earth does have limited real estate as far as right now. We just have these landforms that we live on. A pretty significant portion of the earth is covered in water, and there are plants that grow on and in the water. You have a lot of the algae that we'll study pretty soon. You have seaweeds that are growing. You have these phytoplankton that many of the sea creatures eat. So you have these tiny little plants, which actually do create a pretty significant amount of usable, breathable oxygen for humans as well. So plants that we don't even necessarily know that we do need. So it is important to be mindful of some of these plants before we collapse too many of the integrated structures, which means before we do too much damage to the earth, we want to figure out how we are able to exist and not cause serious harmful damage to humans or the animals, by accidentally killing off some of these plant species, sometimes with our waste, sometimes because we dig up the land and put up houses and parking lots and shopping malls. And so how is it that we can live with these plants? How can we coexist? That's going to be a major focus of this block. So for today, again, getting to the taxonomy part, I'm going to send along a printable that you can take a peek at, along with some classifications of where certain things go. It's not so essential that you know the very proper specific name of the thing, as you understand why we are naming these things, why we would come up with a classification system in the first place. And it's not just so that we can seem smart to our friends. It's really, we want to study these plants so that we can respect them, so that we can respect their home, and so that we can create homes for them if their homes are being destroyed. It's so that we can recognize where they are as part of an ecosystem. In other words, if we kill off the wrong plants, certain animals will die, and then if those animals die, maybe other animals ate those animals, or maybe other maybe other plants relied on those particular plants for shade. Maybe they relied on those plants for food when those plants broke down and fell. maybe certain plants that break down dead plant matter really relied on those plants. So it's essential for us to at least know about these things before we can volunteer to do some help and try to get in there and help out. So again, thanks for tuning in. Do get out in nature. As you can see, I'm out in somewhat nature. I'm in my backyard. At least it's somewhat natural, and there's plants and flowers all around me. And I will see you tomorrow.